Hello and welcome to New York. Our guest today is Helle Thorning-Schmidt. She was a Prime Minister of Denmark, and she is today the Chief Executive of Save the Children International. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I want to begin with the crisis at the border between Burma and Myanmar. We've seen the Rohingya, this Muslim minority, being the victim of what the UN has described as ethnic cleansing. That this situation is getting worse by the day, and you are really very, very concerned about it.
We are very, very concerned because what is happening is a devastating humanitarian crisis. We predict that if nothing is done, there will be 600,000 people coming onto the border, over the border from Myanmar to Bangladesh. These people have absolutely nothing. We have spoken to people on the ground, and we always talk to children. So they have asked these children what they have experienced, and these children have experienced things that children should never, ever experience. We spoke to a 10-year-old boy who have experienced or tells us that children are being shot at the border. We spoke to a girl who says that she had to leave her mother in her home that was burning. So it is devastating stories that we are hearing. No NGO and no UN agency have access into where this is happening in Myanmar, but we know that this is a horrific humanitarian crisis.
There is the humanitarian aspect, yeah. But there's also what's happening behind that border.
Yes.
No one can really access. And would you agree that it's possibly ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity? Obviously, it's difficult to determine, but that's what seems to be happening.
Well, I listen very carefully to what UN observers have been saying, and this is how they are describing the situation. We are not on the ground in the state, so we can't tell what's happening. But what we hear from the children that we have talked to who have come over the border to Bangladesh is indeed devastating, and it shouldn't be happening. These are completely innocent people. These are children, and they have experienced things and seen things that should not be happening. They are walking over the border. They have nothing. I mean, these people are not wealthy people. Why would they be fleeing if it wasn't as serious as UN is talking about? They have absolutely nothing, and we see a Bangladesh who are trying to be welcoming and trying to cope with this very difficult situation. But of course, it is very difficult for a country to receive all these people and try to help them as best possible.
And that number could reach 1 million.
Yeah, we are predicting that it could be 600,000 coming over the border before the end of this year. And we should remember that 400,000 have already crossed the border. It is always the case that more than half of those people will be children. And what we know for sure is that they have no stake in this. They are completely innocent. And at the same time, they are experiencing this horrific violence and a humanitarian situation which is devastating.
What should be done?
Well, first of all, two things is very important. We need access to the areas in Myanmar where we have affected children. But more importantly, we have access into Bangladesh, and we're very happy with the cooperation we have with the Bangladeshi government. But of course, no country can deal with this alone. So I'm hoping, and we are hoping, Save the Children, that now we're gathered here in the UN this week. Let's help Bangladesh as much as possible.
They need money.
They need money, they need resources. We are on the ground and we can help the Bangladesh government, and we will do that. But they need money, they need resources to help this many people. Everyone can imagine what it must be like to suddenly have 400,000 people entering your country, and this is a country that have already welcomed 750,000 people. So everyone can imagine how hard that is. And also, these are people who have absolutely nothing. They have absolutely nothing, and that's why they need urgent help. And I hope that the Bangladeshi Prime Minister will talk about this this week. I'm sure she will. But the international community simply have to step up.
A year ago, exactly here, there was a so-called declarations for refugees and migrants made by the world leaders. Everyone was there. Barack Obama pushed this. And one of the measures that was announced was essentially to make education a priority. And a goal was to enroll 1 million refugee children into school. Where 1 year later, what's happened.
This is a very sad story. I was here last year and I came, Save the Children. We were really talking about education because it is so important that children don't lose out of education. If they lose out of education, these refugee children, it's like we're stealing their future twice. First, they have to flee from their homes. They have to leave everything behind. Then we're stealing their future once more when we deny them access to education. And what we have unfortunately seen since last year and all those words about bringing children back into education after a few months of being refugees is actually that the situation is deteriorating. It's going the wrong way. We have counted that worldwide we have 700 million hours lost for refugee children. We have 3.5 million children worldwide that don't get access to education. And for Syrian children in particular, in the region where they still live, it has actually gone backwards. It has gone backwards by 1/3, where fewer Syrian children get access to education. That we shouldn't be doing that. We should be helping these children to access education. Many times the schools are there, but for a lot of different reasons, it's difficult for these children to get into education.
So the promises made last year have not been fulfilled. So who is responsible?
I think we are all responsible.
I mean, obviously the countries where most of the refugees are in the region, for Syria, let's say Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, have not done their part.
I think they have done their part, actually. They have stepped up in terms of creating the facilities for these children, but there's a lot, we have to understand that for these children there's a lot of obstacle for them to actually get into education. I went to Satari camp some time ago. In Jordan, and I spoke to these young teenagers, and they were telling me that because their parents can't work, they are forced to take jobs outside the camp. They actually sneak out of the camp to take these jobs. It's not legal for them to do so. And that means that even though they're dying to go to school, they so want to get into an education, they can't because they have to work. We have also heard stories that it is not safe for example, girls to go to their education. So there are so many factors that determine whether these children get into education. But the bottom line of all of this is that since last year, where we made a pledge to the world's refugee children that they would get access to education, it's actually gone the wrong way for Syrian children and for refugee children in general.
I want to get to one of the forgotten, quote-unquote, crises, Yemen. There's been a war going on, essentially behind closed doors. There's very little attention. The humanitarian situation is very dire, especially for children, because they don't have enough food, and there's a devastating cholera epidemic right now.
I mean, it is odd with these crises because we hear a lot about it. They are very much in the news, and then suddenly, where did they go? And what is awful about it is that very often it's not because things have gone better, but rather they have gone worse. And what we are seeing in Yemen is that children are dying of cholera. Cholera, a disease that has ceased to exist in Europe 100 years ago. We are now seeing that in Yemen, a country not that far from Europe. So what we need to make sure is that we can get access with the medicine and the help for these children. It is possible with the right intervention, and actually quite simple interventions, to help children from not dying of cholera. But when they are malnourished, which they are in Yemen right now, they get so weak. I mean, these are children that they just simply do not get enough food. They get so weak, so they're very prone to a simple a disease that we could cure if we wanted to, like cholera. And we are seeing children dying of cholera, and what we fear is that it could get much, much worse over the next month in Yemen.
But there again, it's obviously there are two different camps in this war. Are you calling upon Saudi Arabia, for one, and maybe the Houthi rebel groups to grant you access?
Yes.
Because what they're doing is essentially violating humanitarian law.
It is a violation of humanitarian law if they don't grant access for humanitarian assistance, particularly to children, of course. And the issue we're seeing there is that harbors are being closed. There are checkpoints all over, so we spend more time waiting in offices than getting the help out to these children. So it is about access for humanitarian assistance to these children. And I just urge the world to see it again, because as you started out saying, things seem to get forgotten. They leave our TV screens and we forget, oh my God, there was a crisis there as well. But it is still there, and it's actually threatening to get worse for these children on the ground. And there is stuff we can do. We can speak to the warring parties and ask the simple question, could we have better access for humanitarian assistance? It is actually very simple, but what we are seeing, I fear, is that access to people with humanitarian assistance is also used as a weapon of war in these conflicts.
Helle Thorning-Schmidt, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for watching the interview here on France 24.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information. Everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24, a different take on the news.